So glad you guys are all here to our February webinar, which is based on coaching for equity. We still have a few people coming. I see. Thank you, Grant, for letting them in. We're co-hosting for sure. So kind of go over some of our webinar norms that we talk about every time, which is we ask you if you're not talking, mute your mic. That way we don't hear, the kids in the background or the dogs barking. Especially my dog. My dog loves to bark whenever my neighbor takes his trash out. I feel bad. But we do. I'll say he's the wimpiest dog in the world, except for when my neighbor takes his trash out. Then all of a sudden, and he's like this big, and then all of a sudden he becomes a Goliath and wants to take the world down. So we're gonna say,
but we do encourage you having your video on as long as there's nothing distracting back there. Sure. Just because we like seeing your faces, and there will be points when we'll have y'all interact today. So
for sure. And then also we, as part of being in the CTE Teach program, we say that you have to attend at least 5 of the webinars that we've offered. Believe it or not, we've actually offered 10 this year. We ask that you do 5. And the way we take attendance for that is by using your Zoom name. So if you can make sure your Zoom name matches what we have on file for you, that way we can go through and just make sure mark off like, yep, they were there. So, and then as we said, you guys are already doing, please feel free to use the chat to share information, share stuff about tickets and whatnot. I also heard Pearl Jam's going to be coming to LA pretty soon. You need tickets for that. So all that important information. And then lastly, as we do every webinar, this is recorded because we will then send this to you so that you guys can follow up on it. Anything that you wanted to share with your teachers. I had a few of you do that last month where you wanted to share some of the information we talked about. And then the video and all that stuff is there readily available for you. So good stuff. Give me a thumbs up if you've had a good week so far. Most of you, some of you, mishmash. Well, what I love is that, Valentine's Day was just yesterday. There's a little football game that played on Sunday. And here's what I love. I love that even though the Rams won, because Valentine's Day was yesterday, everybody is wearing their 49er colors as they should be. So that's what I love about it. Even though the Rams won, we're all wearing our 49er colors the following
That's
day.
A good one.
Yeah. So Grant, do you want to share our agenda with everyone?
Yeah. So we're going to start off with what I am sure is one of Chris's favorite activities at these, and that's going to be Mushy movie trivia. And so we'll see how much you know. Then we're going to spend a little bit of time in FaceTime, as we traditionally do in our webinars and our mentor chats. We're going to obviously focus our conversations today around coaching for equity, but that's going to evolve, and we're going to see where that goes. We'll take everything into the end of the day with program updates, give you some information, need to know logistics and all that good stuff as well. But that's our show.
Fantastic. So speaking of Valentine's Day, which was yesterday, we are going to play something I love to call Mushy Movie Trivia. It is a Kahoot, so get your phones ready or your second device or whatnot. And you're going to go to kahoot.it, and I'll put it in the chat. And put in that pin. There we go. Kahoot.it. And the pin number is 486-9097. 486-9097. And it looks like they added a new feature where you can just scan that QR code and it'll take you right to it. It's kind of cool. Technology. Somebody made the PIN number their user number as well. So if you're our winner, that will be your number. 368.
33 on here, right? So if you want to get fancy, you can just train your phone camera up there on the QR code and it'll pop up on your phone.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can do it on your computer.
So I got to share a caveat with this is we actually played this game for one of our podcasts. And then in doing it, we asked the questions, we recorded it, and the contestants played, and I came to find out that they actually couldn't even see my screen because I had all like these pictures of the questions I was asking. They couldn't see the screen that I was talking about. It's like some of the questions was like, who's this person? But they were being so polite. They didn't tell me they weren't able to see the picture I was showing them. So that's what I told Grant. We have to do a do-over so that everybody can do this and we do it appropriately, in cahoot, where everybody just loves to not be competitive, just kind of get along and answer mushy movie trivia. All right, are we good to go? I think we're good to go. Here is question number 1. Fill in the blank for this infamous Jerry line from Jerry Maguire. You blank me. Is it love, annoy, disturb, or complete?
I think you gave us the answer in the question.
Oh, you're right. Grant, I can never get this game right.
It's okay. A for effort.
That was the freebie. That's what happens. See, that's what happens when I'm doing these things at like 11 o'clock at night when my kids are finally in bed. All right, you complete me. That's your freebie. Chris Lowe picked up on it first. Let's see if the next one is not so easy. Which idolized musician protects Robbie so he can sing Grow Old With You to Julia in The Wedding Singer? George Michael, Rick James, Billy Idol, or David Bowie?
Jeez.
I want to grow old with you.
This game does not make me feel intelligent.
Billy Idol. A lot of you put David Bowie. Billy Idol is correct. And he doesn't look at all older in that film. He looks exactly like he's still in the 80s in the film. Good job, AP. And first, in When Harry Met Sally, which day of the year does Harry confess his affections to his longtime friend Sally? Was it Valentine's Day? Was it Hanukkah, New Year's Eve, or St. Patrick's Day? Good movie. The answer is it was New Year's Eve. She's at the party. He finally runs up and says, I don't want to live another minute out without you. Great.
When you don't know the answer, pick C.
Yes. Always pick C. That is true. Where did Noah and Allie meet in The Notebook? Was it the top of the Empire State Building, Disneyland, the Carnival, or at a movie theater? Confession, I've never seen The Notebook.
Confession, neither have I.
Nor I.
Yeah.
Man.
The Carnival. You guys got it right. Good job.
We got some smart folks out there.
Absolutely. Question 5 of 8. Where does Sam meet Annie for the first time in Sleepless in Seattle? Meet Annie. Empire State Building, Disneyland, the Carnival, or a movie theater?
I think I know this one.
You should with that picture. It's a dead giveaway. Should have just put Seattle on there. That would have been a challenge. There you go. Empire State Building. Well done. Well done. There's a lot of discussion that goes back and forth on that because they technically see each other before that. But the first time they actually meet is the Empire State Building. How many 90s romantic comedies have Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan starred in together? Was it 1, 2, 3, or 4?
You've got
Meg
mail.
Ryan, romantic comedies.
Yeah.
How many? Tom Hanks and Meg
Holy
Ryan.
goodness. What else besides You've Got Mail?
Ah, you guys got them. 3. That is correct. So the answers are Sleeps in Seattle, You've Got Mail, Joe versus the Volcano.
Well, would not have got the last one.
Fantastic.
Pick C, I'm telling you.
Are you AP, Patrick?
In The Princess Bride, which phrase does Wesley say to Buttercup, which implies I love you? Is it as you wish, get it yourself, you know what I mean, or forever I do all I can for you? I can tell you I would never say get it yourself if my wife said, hey, can you hand me that?
Would be bad.
Get it yourself. As you wish. Well done. Well done. There are people who say that Princess Bride is not as good as Shrek. I beg to differ. Shrek is great, but it's no Princess Bride. Tammy, good job. All right, this is it. Last question. Who are the two main characters in this Titanic Academy Award winning love story? Is that Jack and Rose, Harry and Sally, Jack and Sally, or Leonardo and Kate? Who are the characters? It's Titanic love story. Good job, Jack and Rose. It is. And our winner is third place. AP, good job. Tammy, second place. First place, Monique. Congratulations. You are the Mushy movie trivia expert. Fantastic job. Well done. Give yourself a pat on the back. You know your Mushy movie. Very cool. Well, good. I'm glad we played that. All right, Grant.
An idea.
Yeah.
That's pretty nice. Now you'll be able to go into a breakout room and we're going to spend 10 minutes just talking about those Mushy movies. That's false. But as we do with every webinar, we want to spend a little bit of time in some FaceTime. So some time for y'all just to chat. So Chris is working on putting together these breakout rooms right now. And when you get into these rooms, you're going to spend a little bit of time just exploring with your peers how mentoring is going at the moment, trying to focus specifically on the opportunities that you see for the remainder of the semester. Okay, working with your candidates, the growth that you have the opportunity to engage in, whatever that looks like. You want to consider some of the challenges that are going on, right? But take some time, about 8 minutes, with your partners in your room and introduce yourself. Have a quick chat about how mentoring is going for you. Try to focus on some of those opportunities that you have moving forward. All right.
We're good to go.
Okay. So go ahead and open those up and head into your room. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Grant and I started the notebook while you guys were talking. We only got like 5 minutes in.
Yep.
Seems good.
Are you talking about this notebook?
Yeah, right. That one.
At this point, how many people got ripped out of their room mid-sentence? Right. That's one of those things where we're just not paying attention to the clock. And if you didn't know, there is a clock up in the top right-hand corner. It's really itty-bitty, but it's there. And I forget what it looks like in the breakout rooms, but hopefully there was some good conversation. I'm curious if there are, what are some major takeaways that y'all pulled out of your conversation? What's going on? What are those opportunities?
Well, I felt a little bad because I was trying to transition from my phone to the computer. So I was in a breakout room number one, and then somehow I wasn't. And then when I got put back in, I was put back with a new group. But the new group welcomed me wholeheartedly. So that was great. What I loved about my new group is that what I shared with them, I felt like I wasn't alone because some of them had experienced the same thing that I had experienced. And so it was really great knowing that I wasn't the only one that was having some difficulties. And so that was really nice.
Good.
Cool.
Very good.
Nice to have some community. That's one of the main reasons we have these too. So that's good.
Sure.
What other takeaways or opportunities came up in conversation?
In my room, we talked a lot about how we're having a tough time getting mentees to find time in their super busy schedule to meet with us and to follow up on things. And scheduling has been really hard. I think a lot of us decided it's kind of readjusting to teaching in person and managing our time again. And I think it's caught up to a lot of people. So it's been difficult for all of us.
And I'm glad you share that. Same thing, our mentors as well that we have here at our district have had a challenging time trying to connect with their mentees and emails, calls, all that kind of stuff. But what makes the difference seems to be when they actually can take time to just pop in the classroom and say, how you doing? And then those conversations start to unfold. So it's been a challenge for sure.
That's what we've definitely did with some of our mentees. We literally just popped in their class and said, hi, we've emailed you, we've called you, we've done all that. So here we are. We need to get something on the books.
Yep.
There you go. That's good. And sometimes they need
what
that.
happened today.
Yeah.
I was up in Chico. I was explaining a little earlier to Doug with a bunch of ag teachers this last Saturday and talking to them about what life is like. And some of them are probably in the same boat you are. They're creating 2 lessons for every class to make sure that they've got, varied lessons just on what they're doing on top of them mentoring, new teachers that they've got. It's kind of crazy out there.
Yeah.
So are there any specific opportunities that you have?
Yeah, we're at Valley ROP. We're getting ready for the Tiger Romp, which is a competition between all of the CTE schools.
Yes.
There are not money awards, but valuable awards to be gained. And they're all from police science to CAD to drone flying to medical terminology, CPR, first aid, all over the map. So it's a great day.
That's cool.
Yeah.
'Tis the season. That's what I hear from teachers, right? There's a lot of that kind of stuff happening. Yeah, Christine.
It's CTE month. And so tonight, actually in about an hour, we're presenting to the board. And what we did is we took all of the student work from all the teachers, and especially the newer teachers. So it really shows a celebration of what their students and what they have accomplished.
Awesome.
So we get to show the board and the city, our city of Glendale, what we've been doing.
Yeah, CTE still remains the best kept secret. And every day there's something newsworthy of what's going on in the classroom.
That is
Every day.
so true.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Well, thanks for sharing some of those things. We'll keep those in mind. And as I was talking with Chris, or before we got started today, we want to focus on those opportunities because it's easy to get bogged down in some of the minutia. But any way to keep our heads up, that's great. We'll focus on some of that as we move forward today. So,
For
Chris.
Sure. And we do, and as hard as it is, we do great work. I mean, it's definitely a privilege to be able to be the ones to kind of help new teachers. I have a teacher whose first day of teaching is tomorrow. So I've worked with them the last 2 days. They're excited to get into the classroom for the first time. And it's just, they have those big eyes of like, I can't believe I'm doing this. But just being able to be that person that they're texting or calling or saying like, what do I do? Just being able to be that person, because I remember being in their shoes. And so we do really good work. So speaking of good work, this video needs to not play. Hush. We are going into our topic right now, which is coaching for equity. And I will be the first to tell you that this is the webinar that I wrestled with and talked about, and Grant and I talked about it, and we went round. And I actually wrote my master's thesis on coaching for equity. And so I was telling Grant, like, I have stacks and stacks and stacks of information. But even then I felt like I am not the person to deliver this content because it's such an in-depth conversation for us to have. So one of the things we did is we have this book here. I don't know if you've heard of it or read it or seen it, but it's called Coaching for Equity. And it's from a teacher coach who wrote a book. You guys remember from, if you were with us last year, we sent out a book called The Art of Coaching. And then she did a follow-up book called Coaching for Equity. And it's really about just having these conversations about how is, we providing equitable education, in our districts. And so what we're going to do is we decided, instead of Grant and I trying to deliver this information and really probably not do it justice, is we are going to let the author of the book speak for herself. And I will be honest and say we reached out to the author of the book, asked her if she could be here with us. She was unavailable to do so, but she did give us some resources that we were able to share with you today. So that's kind of cool. So here's what we're going to do. She did a keynote speech not that long ago. We're going to watch a snippet of it, about 20 minutes of it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put you guys back in your breakout rooms and let you not only reflect on the information shared, but really start having conversation as like, how could you present this information to your teachers? How would these strategies and how would these conversations be presented? And so what we're going to do is in chat right now, I'm putting a Padlet in there, and I'll show you what it looks like. And go to the next slide. And these are the 7 strategies that she has. And as we're listening to the, like I said, this snippet of her keynote, I want you guys to just, if you want to drop something in here that is kind of a big idea, like a light bulb for you, drop it in there. Or if you start thinking of resources or things that kind of go along with this, feel free to drop that information in. And the goal is that you guys can have conversations, but also have resources and tools to look back on and really think like, how could I give this information to our mentees? How could I give this information to a brand new teacher? Like I said, I have teachers starting tomorrow. How can this conversation come about as this new teacher is learning about education? So Grant, anything you want to add before we go into our next part?
Yeah, so just want to focus on the fact that as you're watching through the video, this Padlet is your space to capture some notes, some things that come to mind that happen within your district or in your LEA or where your mentees are working. And you'll see that the first 4 strategies that she has, we can debate some of that, are ones that we've probably heard about. When we get into social emotional learning and making sure that we're tending to the needs of our students, we've probably heard a lot about this in the last couple of years. And we want to focus a little bit more on the last 3. So you'll provide some strategies in this note taker, so to speak. We'll come back to it as a central document, but we encourage you to think about how you have strategies for those last 3 as it pertains to your mentees. That's the big piece. So great video, and we'll have that 20 minutes to kind of work independently while we're watching and listening to that video. And then at the end of that point in time, we'll get put into our breakout groups where we can have some deeper conversation and kind of advance some of this work a little bit further.
Perfect. And thank you, Christine, for helping answer that. So yeah, to add to this Padlet, you would just click on the plus sign, and then you can even add comments to some of the stuff that's already in there. So again, our goal is that you guys are able to kind of jot notes down here, but also go back and look at this information and stuff in the coming days. So perfect. All right, so grab your popcorn. I lost my share screen. There we go. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to exit out of here, hit play.
This morning, I want to share with you 7 strategies for building equitable schools. And I'm going to share some of my own stories and personal experiences of the messy parts of this process. So let's dive into the first strategy. Know your why. Why are you aspiring to build equitable schools? Your why is your foundation. There are going to be many moments in this work that are going to be challenging when you'll need to return to your why. It's where your strength, your courage, and your commitment come from. It's your anchor. I want to tell you a little bit about my why. Here's where my commitment to equity began. I was born in England. Neither of my parents are British. My father is Costa Rican, and my mother was Jewish, North American. And why I was born in England is a long story, but I was born there and I lived there until I was 10 years old. And here I was at 10 days old. Here is my 3rd grade class photo, and there I am. And you might notice that my school, my class, was really diverse. Now, in England, there's no separation between church and state. And so every morning we came together for what was called assembly, and we prayed and sang Christian hymns. Now, my family was not Christian, and I was aware that the majority of my classmates were Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh. And yet every day we were instructed to bow our heads and pray. The message was clear. The majority of us did not belong or would have to change our core identities if we wanted to belong. When I started kindergarten, I also discovered that no one else spoke Spanish, which had been my first language, and actually that speaking anything other than English was not acceptable. And I refused to speak Spanish for 10 years. My personal experience of not belonging in school as a child contributed tremendously to my commitment to equity and to my definition of equity. Your why might come from your childhood or family, from your faith or your personal experiences, might come from experiences or learning as an adult. Know your why. It'll be your anchor. The second strategy is to define equity. One of the challenges I see in schools is that there's an absence of shared definitions for commonly used terms like equity. So I want to ask you to take just a moment and think for yourself about how you define equity. Perhaps just let a few words or phrases come to mind. I want to share my definition of equity with you. Equity means that every child gets whatever they need in order to be successful and to thrive in school every day. Every child, every day, regardless of race or ethnicity, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of languages spoken at home, regardless of gender or sexual orientation or religion or ability. Every child, every day, period. And when I say thrive, I mean academically as well as social emotionally. Because kids need literacy and they need numeracy and science and PE and the arts. And they need and they deserve to feel loved for and cared for, and that they belong to a community. They need to know that whomever they are is welcomed, accepted, valued, and embraced. Now, you may remember Maslow's hierarchy, his theory of what we need in order to survive. Maslow argued that physiological and safety needs are fundamental, that we can't do without sleep, water, shelter, food, which sounds about right to me. But there's a social neuroscientist named Matthew Lieberman who wrote this book. And his ideas really affected the way I think about equity. Because what he argued was that in order to survive, from the moment of birth, what we need is a caregiver who is committed to making sure that our needs are met. So he says food, water, and shelter are not the most basic needs for a baby. Being socially connected and cared for is. And so Lieberman says we should move that social down to the bottom of the pyramid. Social belonging might seem like a convenience that we can do without, but it's not, he says. So equity is about belonging. And in order to belong, we must be seen for who we are. We must be seen beyond our race, gender, class, sexual orientation, ethnicity, and so on, and also inclusive of those identity markers. This definition has nothing to do with color blindness. This is about being seen in our entirety. Equitable schools are those in which every child is seen and every child belongs. But I also want to be really clear about something. Equity is about outcomes. Our schools in this country are set up to be the equalizer opportunity. And it's not right that only 50% of students who are born into poverty will graduate from high school. And of those, only 10% will graduate from college. And it's not right that the reading scores for English language learners in 3rd grade lag so far behind those of their white middle-class peers. But equity is about more than just outcomes. It is about belonging. So look for indicators of inequities in test scores and graduation rates, and also look in the less obvious places, like in the Christmas gift exchange, when the student who can't afford the $5 gift feels like she doesn't belong. And the Muslim child feels that in order for him to belong, he needs to celebrate Christmas. So that's the second strategy. Define equity. What does it mean for you in your classroom, in your schools? In order to create something, you need to have a vision for that. The third strategy, accept mistakes. You are going to make them. This was my first year teaching. And in that year, my university supervisor came to observe me, and she video recorded my class with this big old camcorder. And afterwards, we viewed it together and debriefed. And she gave me some feedback that I didn't notice. She said, "You're only calling on the male students." And I felt so ashamed, because I had been that quiet girl in class that teachers ignored. And when I reflected, I realized that I didn't know about wait time, and I just wanted someone to answer the questions. I didn't know about strategies to ensure equitable participation. I was a new teacher, but unconsciously and inadvertently, I was affirming male voices and ideas and dominance. We may have positive intentions behind many of our mistakes. We all have blind spots. We all have knowledge gaps, which is why we need coaches and colleagues and other people we trust who will give us feedback. Now, around this form of inequity in the classroom, there's a lot of research in studies of secondary classrooms around who leads and dominates discussions, who volunteers to read more. It's male students. And what they found is that this starts in elementary school, when teachers engage less frequently with female students. They ask them fewer questions. They offer them less feedback. And male students receive more time, energy, and attention than female students. Get comfortable making mistakes. You are going to mess up as you explore, surface, and interrupt inequities. You already have, and it's okay. It's your responsibility to look at those mistakes and to learn from them and to understand the ways in which you may have perpetuated inequities, but don't let the fear of making mistakes hold you back from looking at your practice. A growth mindset is essential on this journey to building equitable schools. Number 4, learn about implicit bias. Here are two students. On Tuesday, they are both goofy and off task. And on Wednesday, they both refuse to do their math assignment. Same behavior. Will they receive the same punishment? Researchers at Stanford studied this question of whether or not African American students would receive the same punishment for the same behavior as their white counterparts. And what they found was that the African American students would be punished more harshly. Why? Not because of overt racism, but because of implicit or unconscious bias. So I want to tell you how this experiment was conducted. The researchers showed all of these teachers the behavior records of a group of middle school students, and they said, imagine these are your kids. And these were students who had misbehaved twice for distracting students and defiance. Now, the researchers gave some of the behavior records the names of stereotypically African American students, such as Deshawn or Darnell. And they gave the other set of behavior records the names of stereotypically white students, such as Jake or Greg. That was the only difference in the study. And the teachers reviewed these behavior records, and then they responded to a series of questions, which included these. It should say, how irritated do you feel by the student? How severely do you think he should be disciplined? And would you call the student a troublemaker? And again, remember the only difference was the names of the students. And what did they find? Teachers were much more likely to increase the punishment for Darnell and Deshawn than they were for Greg or Jake. They were much more likely to want to suspend Darnell or Deshawn. This is scary. And by the way, there wasn't a difference in the response from the African American teachers. Implicit bias was just as strong in the eyes of Black teachers. Implicit bias is what leads to this. African American students are 3.5 times more likely to be suspended or expelled than their white counterparts, and that's according to a Department of Education report. My commitment to equity continues to be deeply personal to me. That's my child. And not only do I want him to be in class and learning as opposed to in the office or on suspension, but I really want his teachers to know him for who he is. I want them to see his inquisitiveness, his questioning, his enthusiasm, and not just see him as a defiant Black boy. I just want my child to be known for who he is. So learn about implicit bias. It affects not only how we respond to student behaviors, but to a number of decisions that we make in schools, including curriculum and hiring, promotions. And implicit bias is not just about race. We have bias around people we don't know, we don't understand. And so we can have implicit bias around class, gender, sexual orientation, around religion and ability. We all have implicit bias, and we can shed ourselves of a lot of it. And I do have some reading recommendations for you to get you started, perhaps, or help you continue on that journey. So we begin to build equitable schools by seeing each individual human being. And with that knowledge, building communities in which, when students dive into projects, they can learn with and from each other. And with that knowledge, designing the kind of learning opportunities so that students will be prepared for college and career. So seeing is a precursor to belonging. But seeing is harder than it sounds, because our vision, our ability to see each other, has been distorted. It has been distorted by implicit bias and by systemic oppression. And the way that we see some groups is particularly grotesque. This country was built upon some ideals which I am proud to uphold. And this country was built with the blood and the sweat of millions of African slaves. And until we contend with that history, we won't be able to make progress on our project to build equitable schools, because that history, it permeates our institutions. It's woven into our cultural fabric. It's in the air that we breathe. We must contend with that history. Perhaps, even as I've been talking, you've noticed that you've had some emotions come up. You will have emotions, and it's okay. As you become more aware of inequities and implicit bias, you will have emotions, and your feelings will change and shift, and you'll have so many of them. This was my son's first day of kindergarten. I wish we had used a real camera. This was the original iPhone camera. I wish we'd used a real camera because it's so grainy, but took him to school, dropped him off, and I had no idea on that day that the barrage of feelings that I was already experiencing working in schools was going to get even bigger and more intense as I left my own child in our local public school. I had to learn how to take care of myself, how to recognize and acknowledge and even embrace my emotions in this journey. You will have feelings as you move along this journey to build equitable schools, and other people are going to have them too. Our emotions are okay. In fact, they could actually be our allies on this journey to building equitable schools. The path to equity is paved with emotions. We have to start getting comfortable acknowledging them and even talking to each other about our feelings. Now, when I first started teaching, I responded to implicit bias with quite a storm. We're on confront implicit bias. This is strategy number 6. When I first started teaching, one of my colleagues said this to me. Our district had made the decision to keep some bilingual classes. And she said, "This is America. They should just speak English." Now, my response to her was kind of problematic. It wouldn't really be appropriate for me to tell you exactly what I said in response, but it resembled this. And I had to live with the unintended consequences of that for years as I continued to work with her. Initially, when I heard and saw implicit bias, I responded with, I think, sort of a storm. And then I went through this phase that I think about as my jaw-dropping and silence phase, when I would hear things and I just didn't know what to say, and I would turn, walk away, and then spend days ruminating over what I wish I had said. And that wasn't productive either. It took me years to learn what to say, really. And so last October, a teacher said the same thing to me. She was frustrated that some of her students were talking to each other in Spanish as they were doing an experiment. And she said, "This is America. they should just speak English. And I had just started coaching this teacher. And calmly, without really thinking too much, I turned to her and I said this: I'm really curious to understand where that belief came from. Would you be willing to talk with me about that? And that conversation led her to a place of deep reflection, to really thinking about that belief. Once you learn about implicit bias, you're likely to start seeing it everywhere. Don't explode and don't stay silent. Learn how to respond in a way that might ultimately help kids. The last strategy is to look and listen. Now, I'm going to tell you a story about one of my most painful moments as a teacher. And I've actually never shared this anywhere. And so why not just share it with 1,000 strangers? But I really believe we're going to have to start talking about our missteps, the hard parts, the moments of embarrassment or shame. So one semester, after I'd been teaching for 12 years already, I was teaching an elective class called Study, Life, and Social Skills. And we had same gender elective classes. And I had a group of 8th grade boys who were really challenging. I had never had classroom management problems. I had taught middle school for 12 years, never had them, and there they were. One day, my principal asked if I would meet with her and some of my students. And my principal, Larissa Adam, is one of the most amazing leaders I've ever known, and I trusted her completely. I went down to her office, and in her office were 3 African-American boys, the only 3 African-American 8th grade boys in that class. And Anthony said, "We feel like you single us out, like you treat us more harshly than you do other students who behave just as bad or worse. We feel like you single out the black boys." And my heart sank, and I had this moment of defensiveness as I started mentally listing all the reasons why they were wrong. And at the same time, I knew that they were right, that it was true. And I felt such an intense mixture of sadness and humility. And my response to them was, "I am so sorry. And I'm so amazed by your courage and so grateful that you went to Miss Adam for support." And that was a turning point for me as a teacher. I started to reflect on my practice differently, to think about my own implicit bias differently, and to think about how we listen to students, how we create the safe spaces where students can be heard. It made me think about the role of the principal in a school in making sure that students could turn to another adult and be heard and supported and listened to. And I started listening to my own students in different ways. I started doing different projects and assignments with them so that I could hear about their experience more. Now, educators aren't alone in our interest, in our exploration about how to build a more equitable world. And I find great inspiration in how others in the world are dealing with social challenges. And so I want to tell you about a project that was done in Europe around how Europeans are responding to the refugee crisis. And I'm going to show you a 1-minute video about this project.
6, 5. Nee, 6, 5.
Here's what that video makes me think about in our context. Perhaps it could be easier than we think to reduce our implicit bias, to see each other, to learn how to listen to each other. Maybe we can find new ways of seeing and listening to each other. Maybe building equitable schools could begin with something as simple as just looking at each other.
Jeez.
Right.
That's a
So at this moment, like I said, some heavy conversation, heavy thoughts. What we're going to do, and Grant, I'll let you chime in a minute here. We're going to put you back in your breakout rooms to kind of have these discussions, but I want to reiterate, the focus isn't just like, what did you get out of it and what is your feelings on it? The focus is putting the mirror up in front of yourself, but more so in front of your teachers. And how can your teachers learn from this information for the ultimate goal of how do we make our classrooms stronger? How do we make our teachers stronger so that all kids in their class, especially CTE, because we always hear, oh, well, CTE is for the kids that aren't going to go to college, or CTE is for the kids that aren't that smart. How do we level that and say CTE is for everybody and make our classrooms stronger with this information?
Some of the strategies and the takeaways that are on that Padlet, that should be a central focus for the conversations that y'all are about to have.
This morning,
and
I want to share.
Recall that we want to focus a little bit more of our energy on the last 3 items, right? The first 4 are valuable and we can pull some things from those, but it's more likely that you've seen those already. You've handled those in your schools and you know everything about those. It's more likely. So if we focus on how we coach our teachers to embrace emotions, confront implicit biases, and just to simply look and listen, I'd be curious to hear that conversation in your groups. So we'll return to those groups here for a little bit. The video is up there, and I know Christine asked about sharing that link, so we might be able to share that link for the video if you wanted to pinpoint something. But otherwise, feel free to head into those rooms, and we'll come back together and chat afterwards. I see that we've got just about everybody back. I gather that we had some good conversations. You know, Chris and I were talking, we were like, wouldn't it be great to be a fly on the wall in these rooms, just listening to some of the discussion? But we're not gonna, because we don't want to unintentionally inject like our thoughts or just our presence into y'all's conversations, just to make sure things are as organic as possible. And so on that light, we're kind of curious about some of those major takeaways. So what are some big ideas that came out of your discussion? Did you consult what was in the Padlet in terms of some strategies? And really, this is just kind of a popcorn free for all. We're going to spend a couple minutes just trying to understand some of these things before we move forward. So feel free to raise up a hand if you've got something to share, and we can pick on y'all in order, and we'll go from there. So Mark, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, we were in an interesting room with 4 of us and from all over the place. It seems like Beatrice, Dee, and Ms. Rudolph. And we all agreed on one thing, is that we all reflected on that video, and we would all like a copy of that video to show our mentees, because the book would be great, but another thing we agreed on is our people most likely will not have time to read that book.
Right.
But we can go ahead and put that video on, and then we can have discussion afterwards. And so if we could get that, that would be great. So that's one thing that came out of our group.
We will definitely be sending that your way.
Thank you.
Dr. Emery?
Yes, in my group, we had some really good conversations about how we made sure that students felt heard and how our classroom was a community so that their emotions, that we can embrace what they're actually feeling and not just make assumptions about what they're feeling. We got cut off a little bit early, so I just wanted to finish my thought. We were talking about, when it comes to promoting or discussing the history in America for Black people, African Americans, that a lot of the time that we make sure that we're talking about the struggle and how important it is to talk about the struggle. But as I said in my group, I am African American, but I refer to myself as Black. And what I need for everybody to understand is that it's not just about the struggle, but how you're overcoming it. And when you're talking to your kids, you need to make sure that they're able to express how they overcame. Because when we look at our history, we're always talking about what the struggle is and what was wrong with our people. We don't spend enough time talking about how we overcame it and to be successful. And that will give, that will give the students a position to actually discuss that.
Awesome.
That's an awesome sentiment. Thank you so much for sharing that. I could spend the rest of our time talking about that piece, but we'll move to Chris. What were some big takeaways for you?
I think the bigger takeaway was the fact that we all felt that all of the 7 were important, not just the last 3. And so that we wanted to share all 7 of those, just because they're foundational, it seems that they're complementary and foundational, and that it's kind of, we disagreed that the last 3 should be the only thing that we focus on. So that was something that we all agreed on when we looked at that and thought that, and of course, just like it's mentioned in the chat, we all want a copy of the video as well.
That's cool. I appreciate that because we're all at different spaces of understanding and implementation, right? And so I probably take a look at it with a little bit of bias and see that the last 3 are really great actionable spaces, but you can't really build on those if we don't have an understanding of the first 4, right? So I appreciate you mentioning that. That's good stuff. Were there any other major takeaways that came out of our group conversation?
I kind of brought up, I don't know if your school districts do this, but if they don't, you should really look into it, is restorative justice and restorative practices and using community circles really addresses all the things we talk about with equity, with implicit bias. It lets kids have a safe space where they can share what they're thinking and how they're feeling, as well as you as a teacher. And even if you do it with your mentees, it works out great too. It really builds community. It gives kids ownership of their classroom. They feel like they're connected. Your behavioral issues usually decrease, and it gives every kid the allowance to be successful. Like every single kid is equal in that circle. And even if they're saying something that is really offensive or whatever it is, you all sit there and discuss it, and you all kind of own what's going on. It's not just the teacher led, it's more like student led.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. We were a big RTI and restorative justice school at the last school that I taught at. So I'm right there with you on the nose, Christine. Thank you. So, well, I would love to continue this conversation in part because this is a lot of my life's work. And as Chris mentioned, it was part of his master's thesis. So I think we do have some unique knowledge and some networks to touch base on this topic a little bit further. But we'd be here forever, right? And sometimes we have to push the soldiers out and do the good work and to make sure that we take what's in these seminars and actually activate it and engage our mentees and our students and our faculties and so forth with this work. So the topic of equity isn't done. It's just a pause in what we're doing with the CTE Teach program, recognizing that it's important as we move forward throughout the rest of this school year. And so thank you for engaging in that. Thank you for your authenticity and your candor and your willingness to have some conversations. And we will be sharing the video. We'll be sharing the slide deck with you as well, so you have all those resources. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Chris or myself, and we can move from there. But otherwise, Chris, if you want to take us through.
Interject really quick. So, yeah, we will be sending this out. And as I mentioned before, I actually reached out to see if she was available to present this, and she was not. But she did give us these links to some resources concerning the subject. And I do want to encourage you, this is totally a commercial. She should be paying me for this. If you are a coach, if you are a mentor, check out her podcast, Bright Morning Podcast. I listen to it. I subscribe to it. And what it is, it's not just conversations about this type of topic, but a lot of it is she just records conversations she has with her mentees. And she asks them like, hey, is it okay if we record our conversations? The mentee's always anonymous, but you get to hear these conversations that she has with these teachers and some of the struggles. And just, it's just a really cool, literally being that fly on the wall and just listening to how she's coaching some of these teachers. So it's free. And again, all these links we'll be sending you. In addition to that, we are going to send you this book. So it just came out last year. If you are a mentor in the program, we will be mailing it to you. And so what you will need to do, and I will follow this up in an email as well, is I'm going to put this into the chat right now. Hopefully you guys can all see it. And what we need is we need you to select who your district is and put in here what your district's mailing address, so that we can ensure that we send a book for every mentor that you have in your program or at your site that's in this program. So we have a list of who the mentors are, and we just need to verify that we have the correct mailing address so that you can get this book. And again, we will be sending it before the year is out. We already have a ton of them that we are ready to go. We just need your guys' information. And so Grant, I want to wrap us up with some closing program stuff. So we have about 3 minutes.
Yeah, so these are all the technicalities, right? We're in Q3 right now, which is crazy to think. But you want to make sure that within your LEA, you're meeting with your region program coordinator. You facilitate some sort of training with your mentees, and we've talked about the variety of ways that can happen, and make sure those documents and evidence are uploaded to the folder along with those quarterly logs. You've put some great things into those quarterly logs so far, and so we want to keep that rolling. We want to keep learning from what y'all are putting in there. And in this second semester, we do like to focus on those virtual visits. That's that second bold heading down there. So before March 31st, just make sure that you schedule a 30-minute visit with your regional coordinator, so that way we can connect with you, see how things are going. The links are there in the slide deck. And the semester 1 stipends, all semester activity logs were received. They're currently being processed. So if you're a mentor, you can tell your administrator, or administrators just note that those things are in the works, and you should be receiving a notification from our business staff shortly about what you can invoice us for that semester. This will be pretty similar for the end of the spring, so just keep that in mind. Awesome. And then we're coming close to the end of the year. You can see all those lines where the words are stricken through, and our next series is going to be March 15th. And so, Chris, I want you to share about these, because you have a pretty succinct way of talking about those workshops.
Sure. So we are going to be at Educating for Careers. Those of you who are going, come check out our session. But also in our next webinar, some of our participants, and actually they're right next to each other in my window right here, who are presenting at Educating for Careers are also going to present with us the information that they are doing there. So one of them is a session on podcasting for the student voice. And also the second one is building a robust program by supporting teachers and students. And they'll go into doing like CTIG and grant writing, all that kind of stuff. So, so next month we'll still be in this Zoom room together, but you guys will have the option to kind of choose which one you want to go to. And I'm excited for it. And mostly important, I'm excited to see everybody in person. If you are going to Educating for Careers, you can come see us in person. I'm excited. So yeah. So we have a question? No. Right. So lastly, always check out our media. We keep this will be up on there. This webinar will be there shortly. You can check us out on all of our social media stuff. And we have some new things that are coming down the pipeline for the end of the year that we will be sharing with you. We are going to talk about it at Educating for Careers in person, but then we'll start sharing some new stuff we have coming up. And we're just excited about the growth of the program. And I think that is it. We good, Grant?
I think so. We're just under that exit ticket.
Fantastic. So if you have a moment, if you could give us just feedback on this, we always appreciate it. We appreciate everything you guys do. If you can give us just kind of feedback on that. And other than that, have a good week, and we will see you at the end of the month at Educating for Careers. And if not, we will see you in March. So stoked.